Hey everyone, and welcome to Rambling Reviews, where we analyze different types of media and/or their cultural relevance. My name is Christian, and this is Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive. With the success of the first game, Sega and Sonic Team got to work right away on a sequel. The two splitting up into two separate teams, the Japan side being Sonic Team, and the American side being the Sega Technical Institute, which, yes, of course, is STI for short. Unfortunate acronym aside, the group came together and gave us one of the best, and to many, the best Sonic game in the entire series. I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite. I think my personal favorite is probably Sonic Generations, but even out of the original classics, maybe it's probably either the Sonic 3 and Knuckles, as we'll look at later, or it might even be the game that the Japanese side worked on, which we'll get to later, Sonic CD. But like I said, we'll get to all that later. Now, when it came to marketing, they spared no expense. I mean, Sonic was all over TV, all over commercials, all over on like cereal boxes. He had a crossover brand with Honey Nut Cheerios. There were all kinds of different things, and they were really pushing the whole concept of Sonic being that edgier version of Mario, if you will. You know, Sonic being kind of the lame goody two shoes, and Sonic being a lot more, well, yeah, again, edgy and things of that nature. Really kind of reveling in that just 90s cool, if you will. And eventually, in 1992, on a Tuesday dubbed Sonic Tuesday, the world saw the release of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Now, I do want to bring up that once again, I am using a fan remake for the thumbnail and for this this image here for the game, as opposed to the American version, because once again, I do not like this art style. I hate it with a passion. Also, by the way, they gave Robotnik a beard here when we all know Robotnik has a mustache. What are we doing here? Like, this wasn't even, they didn't even give him a beard in like the cartoons or the Archie comics or anything like that. He never had a beard. So this, like, no. But the posing, yes, I quite enjoy this. Now, I do want to talk as well briefly about how there was a portable version of the original Sonic the Hedgehog as well as Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Game Gear. Personally, I don't really care for either of these versions. They're great as like a novelty and as being portable and stuff, and once again, I'm sure many people are nostalgic for it, but it's just not my cup of tea. My biggest issue with them is that they're just kind of boring. You know, like they don't really do that much to be very interesting. I understand that, a lot of elements of them would later be taken for some games that only came out for the Game Gear and Master System. Things like Sonic Triple Trouble and um, others that I can't think of off the top of my head. But yeah, it's just Sonic Chaos. That's the other one. But it's just not my cup of tea. One thing I do want to say is that in the Game Gear version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, if you don't get all the Chaos Emeralds and get the good ending, Sonic looks up at the sky and sees like a shape of tails, like a bunch of stars in the shape of tails, indicating strongly that Foxboy's dead. Speaking of Tails, in this game we're introduced to the character of Tails Miles Prower. If you thought the puns were going to stop with Sonic Tuesday, you'd be wrong. His official name is Miles Prowler, but of course everybody calls him Tails, including Sonic. Speaking about that, let's get into the story a little bit here. Again, there's not really too much to go on. Eggman's just kind of back doing his thing. Once again, I am going to refer to Robotnik and Eggman interchangeably because I grew up calling him Eggman, and that is also what he was called in Japan. He was never called Robotnik in Japan, so his name always has been Eggman. It's just that there are also, anyway, I'm going to use them interchangeably. But anyway, Tails was essentially kind of bullied by other people for being like a freak fox with two tails, which I mean, when everybody else is anthropomorphic in the world, don't really think they have room to talk. But in any case, Sonic was kind of the only one who actually like stood up for him, if you will, and kind of showed him the way to just kind of be a hero and stuff. The manual says that the spin dash, which is first shown in this, apparently Tails actually learned it, and then Sonic kind of learned it from him. But I've also heard that no, actually Sonic did come up with it on his own, and Tails copied him. So, it's kind of all over the place. Like I said before, the lore of the original games and everything was all over the place, and I mean, kind of still is now. So not much has really changed. It's never really been consistent with this Blue Guys franchise. But when we start up the game, we have our first introduction of the classic thing where Sonic runs across the screen and we have that iconic Sega jingle. This was the first time that happened, at least that I know of, unless it happened in Wacko Wacko Patrol Car. There were other Sonic games, by the way, where Sonic was in them. A lot of them we're not really going to be talking about or discussing that much because they're not. I just don't really care that much about them. If you want to see me, look into them and go over them, I can definitely do that as well. But, for the most part, we're just sticking with, well, I guess just the stuff that I'm interested in. So, yeah. In any case, we're greeted with the title screen where we see Sonic and Tails. I do want to point out that here in the options menu, you actually can change some things, including you can make the settings to be just Sonic, that you're only playing as Sonic. You can also only play as Tails. Although many people are probably familiar with, of course, Tails' flight, as he's iconic for now, he couldn't actually do that in gameplay. He could do that if you were playing as Sonic, and Tails would, fly in if he died, but you couldn't actually play as... You couldn't fly if you yourself were playing as Tails. So, he looks different, but for the most part, Tails plays the same. Also, interesting fact, you could pop your... a second controller into the second player slot, and another person could play as Tails, where they would basically be invincible. Yeah, they could die, but they'd come right back without costing you any rings or continues. But yeah, if that's the kind of thing you're into, it's great. Great, little brother mode, as a lot of people would call it, right? There would be other games that would revisit this idea, like Shadow the Hedgehog, way later in the future. But again, we will discuss that when we get to it. The first level of the game is Emerald Hill Zone. Here we're introduced to... Now, we did have the iconic, loop-de-loops that Sonic has in a lot of games and still has them now. However, they weren't as prominent in the first game. This is the game where they really start taking more prominence. And, you can see from this game that, of course, it's a lot more vibrant. We once again do, of course, have the 3 acts to the level and things of that nature. Though something I want to mention as well is the special stages are actually very much more frequent. Instead of waiting till the end of the level to get to special stages in this game, you can reach them by simply entering a checkpoint with 50 rings. You jump up to the little top part of the pole of the checkpoint, if you will, and you're instantly transported into a special stage. Now, keep in mind what I said earlier about Tails not losing you rings, because in the special stages, as you play through them, your goal is to collect a certain amount of rings in these little half pipes. Now, one thing I want to say before, or as well, I like these special stages more thematically for Sonic, but I still don't like these special stages. Again, I'm not a fan of special stages in general. I don't like having to do extra work to get Super Sonic. I like him being a story beat character and something that you just get for doing all the main stories of the game. I guess you could say that alternate stories like in the adventure games are, kind of like a special stage equivalent, if you will, but I don't know. I don't quite think of it that way, because special stages you really have to go out of your way and know about them before you actually do them. So, But in any case, what I mentioned earlier about the rings, so your goal is to get these rings. But as you can see, even in the screenshot here, further to the left, we have a bomb coming up. Now, if you hit these bombs, you lose the rings. Tails can collect rings for you too, but, and this is important, he can also lose you rings. So whether you're playing with Tails as the computer or you're playing with him as a second playable character, in the special stage, he can cost you rings. So if you want an easier time getting all the rings so you can finish the special stages and get the Chaos Emeralds, you can you're better off just playing as Sonic. Speaking of Chaos Emeralds, this is the first game where there are officially 7 Chaos Emeralds as opposed to the 6 that we had in the first game. And just like the first game, we still have 3 acts once again, except this time we have. Actually, I do apologize. We have. I misspoke. We have 2 acts. And this time, at the end of the second act, which is not just a shorter level this time, but more a full on level, if you will, we reach Robotnik once again, and it's the same vibe as before. You hit him 8 times, he shows up with a new machine, you take out his machine, and that's really it. The first one we have here is this little drill he pilots in a as he turned his Eggomatic into a truck almost. Um, it does fire outward actually as well if you're on the wrong side of it. So that is interesting. And at the end, you break a capsule, free the animals, and move on to the next level, just like you did in the first game. This game is a great example of a sequel taking the elements that worked for it before and simply perfecting them. It really doesn't try to fix what isn't broken, but it really does take upon itself, um, you know, reiterating on and improving the things that came before it, which is, in my opinion, everything that a sequel should be. The next level sees us traveling to Chemical Plant Zone, where you'll probably be spending most of your time in a ball form because you're going to be spending a lot of it traveling through these transportation tubes, rolling down these inclines of, I'm not entirely sure what these kind of walkways are meant to be, but I guess they're more pipes that you're just running on, given that they have this blue liquid in them, which we're going to be seeing later as well. And you're going to be trying your best to avoiding this purple liquid that's called Mega Muck. Now, this level has been so influential that, of course, it returned to Sonic Generations as well, and has been used a couple times even since. Not quite as bad as Green Hill Zone has been overused, but it is kind of approaching those levels. Regardless, though, Chemical Plant is a very fun level overall, and even that Mega Muck that you can fall into is nothing. I mean, nothing compared to the water that is Labyrinth Zone. Once you make it to the end of the level, though, you once again come head-to-head with Robotnik, as this time he's once again piloting his Eggomatic, but he's actually using this blue liquid we saw earlier, filling it up in these containers and intending to drop it on you, though most people that play this game won't actually even see that liquid, and I would actually argue the real hazard in this level, or in this boss, is those platformers below you, because I can't tell you how many times I've played this where I get to those platforms and they just open up and I fall into them without even without even getting a chance to fight Robotnik at all. One thing I want to mention as well with this game, there are a lot of exploits. For example, you can get all of the Chaos Emeralds in the first act of Emerald Hill Zone. Similarly, if you really know what you're doing, you can easily just jump on the enemy once, or on the boss, I should say, once, and keep bouncing on them, like here, for example, and you'll be able to take them out no problem at all. It can be argued that kind of way can kind of take the fun out of the game, but, I mean, I get it. Many people have fun doing speedruns and exploits and all that, so why not? After all, Sonic's a game that's kind of made to be sped-run. Speaking about that, one thing that I think is really cool about the notion of Sonic in general is it's a game that is very much, very stylish for one, the character, the franchise, all of that. But also, Sonic games are, I would say, easy to play, hard to master. The real fun in them comes from not just playing through them once, but playing through them over and over again and getting better at them and being able to do all the stylish different things like bouncing from one enemy to the next or one ring box to an enemy and all these different things. But there's definitely just a lot, and a lot of that we really did see with this game specifically. This game, I would say, if anything, Sonic the Hedgehog 1991 walked so Sonic 2 could run. But just as you've enjoyed the high speed of Chemical Plant Zone, you come to a bit of a stop as we now deal with aquatic ruin zone. Now, in my opinion, first of all, once again, nothing, and I mean nothing, compared to the torture that was Labyrinth Zone or even the tedium that was Marble Zone in Sonic 1. However, in my opinion, this is very much what Marble Zone, or what both of those levels should have been, kind of the best of both of those things put into one level. One of the things that we have is, now, Sonic levels are in general kind of known for having multiple paths. The top path tends to be the hardest to stay on, but the most rewarding. And in the case of both Chemical Plant and Aquatic Ruin, it is the best way to avoid the water. If you get stuck in it, it's the same thing like it was in Sonic 1. You got a little bit of time before you start drowning, you can collect air bubbles to keep air, so on and so forth. Now, while the bottom path you have to deal with more water and things of that nature, of course it does take a bit more skill to stay on the top path, and you have to deal with, more obstacles and such as, for example, these arrows that kind of shoot out of these. I'm not really sure what they're called, but they're often seen in movies with like ancient booby traps, and things like I think Indiana Jones and stuff has a lot of stuff like that. In any case, once you make it to the end of the level, you of course come face to face once again with Dr. Ivo Robotnik, and these little pillars that are here, you can actually jump on and attack him that way. Like you can jump on them when the boss is first starting. Again, one of those exploits I mentioned before. I think this game does have a lot more exploits in general than Sonic 1 does. But in any case, what you're intended to do is jump on these arrows that fire and stick into the totem poles and attack him that way. Once again, hit him 8 times, you're good to go. It's done. I think it is a pretty fun boss overall. Definitely, in my opinion, it's more fun than either of the two bosses before. The first one's just kind of piss easy, and the one in Chemical Plant is, I just have died too much to the floor collapsing, and if you do the boss right, it's just not that fun. This is a fun one because it incorporates platforming into fighting the boss itself. I feel similarly about the Egg Golem fight in Sonic Adventure 2, where you have to do platforming to get to hit the enemy in the first place, and I like a lot of bosses like that when it comes to platformer games like this. While I believe Aquatic Ruin Zone is a mix of the best of what Labyrinth Zone and Marble Zone had to offer, Casino Night Zone is clearly a expansion on Spring Yard Zone, and I could see an argument for saying Starlight Zone as well. With Casino Night Zone, we have this pinball aesthetic going on. We have this slot machine where you can get lives, you can get more rings, you can get all kind of different things. You can also lose rings if you line up the slots to be all Eggman. Similarly, by the way, there are monitors in the games, both Sonic 1 and 2, that actually do have Eggman on them, and if you hit those, you lose all your rings, and of course, if you don't have any rings, well, you die. But again, I really like the aesthetic for this. There is, as far as like set pieces, there's also this thing to note where there's these elevators you ride up and everything. But no, I really do like the aesthetic. I would say this is my favorite level because once again, if you look in the back there, what do you see? A city. And you know how I feel about the city aesthetic. I love it. I can't get enough of it. Once you reach the end, though, once again, of course, you come face to face with Robotnik once again, as this time you're actually fighting in essentially a pinball table. You do have the ability to use the flippers, the I'm not quite sure what they're called, but the things on a pinball that you hit to move the ball, and you can fling Sonic like a ping ball up at Eggman. Personally, I like to kind of spin dash up the sides and attack him that way. But however you want to take him out, hit him again 8 times, and that's all she wrote. Moving on, we have Hilltop Zone, which is essentially Green Hill Zone with lava. Now, that's a bit of a reductive take, but especially the way that it looks, it's Green Hill Zone, except it's blue, where there's typically brown, and there's lava. Now, there is a lot of fun that actually is to be had with the lava. There are these moments where you're kind of avoiding it, and there's even a moment where you're avoiding a wall of lava that's essentially rising from the ground. And that brings us to another very important aspect of this game. If you've collected all 7 Chaos Emeralds up to this point, now whenever you collect 50 rings and jump, you transform into Super Sonic. Now, there is a bit of an issue with this where, as I mentioned, anytime you jump, so you are much faster. You're invincible as long as your rings don't run out, because as the time runs out, your rings run out 1 ring per second, and you can keep up your supersonic form by continuing to collect rings. You don't have to maintain 50 rings, but you have to just have rings in general once you've had those 50 rings. However, you do become very slippery, and there's especially a level we'll get to in a minute called Sky Chase a little bit later, and that is a level you absolutely do not want Supersonic on. But I do have to be honest, in regards to Supersonic in general, the pain of going through those special stages, is really not worth it in my opinion to get Supersonic. However, there is another way that you can get Supersonic as well. From the title screen, you can go to the options menu and go to sound select. From here, you want to enter and play each sound in this order: 19, 65, 9, and 17. Then you'll be able to go back to the main menu, and you want to hold the jump button and press start while, like, when it comes up on screen and you can press start. Normally you would just start the game from Green Hill Zone, but now if you've done the sound select right, you'll have the level select. Now this is very important because from here you can play any level from any order you want, and this is my preferred way to play the game on repeat playthroughs. But the important part here for Supersonic is from here you go to the sound select and you now play the sounds 4, 1, 2, and 6. Now, the reason that I mention you go to this sound test is because I personally made the mistake many times of doing this, where I would specifically go to the sound test, but I went to the sound test in the options menu rather than on the stage select, and didn't understand why I wasn't getting. Well, when you do everything correctly, you'll get a little ring sound effect letting you know, and that will essentially let you know that you have Supersonic. From here, you'll be able to use Supersonic whenever you want. You just got to get those 50 rings, and you're good to go. Much better way of getting, much better way than painstakingly going through and getting all of the Chaos Emeralds and everything like that. And I completely understand how having all the Chaos Emeralds and being able to go Supersonic is a nice payoff for having completed all the special stages. I get that, and I understand people that, like that as a reward and everything, but to me, it's just not worth it. And if you can cut through the bullshit and still get the reward, why not, right? As Supersonic, you are completely invincible to everything: spikes, enemies, even lava. And a great example of that is as we reach the boss of the boss of the zone here, we have Eggman once again in another contraption, very similar to what we saw in Marble Zone in the first Sonic game. And you can see that as Supersonic, you can even stand on the lava. So again, it is a pretty good reward, but considering you can get this without having to deal with the bullshit of the special stages, my preferred way to go. Eggman here will, similar to the boss with Marble Zone in Sonic 1, he will fire out projectiles, you avoid them, bounce on him, or you can, bounce under him in Supersonic especially. Supersonic, even just touching the enemy or any badniks will also destroy or do damage to them. And with that, you're of course on to, yet again, the next zone. And now we enter a rather infamous level in the Sonic fanbase with Mystic Cave Zone. This level is full of basically traps and has a relatively spooky aesthetic and theme to it going on here. But overall, it's a pretty fun level. It's definitely not a type of just, run straight across kind of thing. There's a lot more horizontal platforming and things of that nature to this level. But the reason it's so infamous is not because of Act 1. Rather, once we enter Act 2, there is a section referred to simply as the pit, where if you fall into it, it's nothing but spikes with no way back up. And if you fall in a supersonic, you're waiting until you run out of rings and are able to finally be killed by the spikes. It is a trap that has caught many a player um, off guard, and of course has recently in more remakes and remasters of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, it has been turned into a way to enter a also relatively not infamous but more so I would say famous previously unfinished level called Secret Palace Zone. Now, we'll get into the specifics of that when we discuss the remakes and stuff in the future, but you know, this pit and Hidden Palace Zone had fascinated the community for years. It was up there with Luigi and Mario 64 and those kind of internet rumors and stuff like that, if you will. Those kind of forum fan base rumors, if you will. The boss of this zone sees us once again facing off against Shocker, Robotnik, as he attacks you with both falling stalagmites and these two drills he uses to, drill into you and kill you that way. Of course, as Supersonic, you're invincible and can defeat him even just by touching him, but whether you're taking him on a Supersonic or regular Sonic, hit him the number of times you need to do, avoid the stalagmites, and you're good to go. With Mystic Cave Zone done, we now reach Oil Ocean Zone, which essentially has an aesthetic, and I guess the setting where you're meant to be is some kind of oil refinery. Now, it must be noted as well here that we also have some incredible music, some very Arabic style, kind of snake charmer-esque, if you will, music. And I do want to mention about the music that very much like the first game, the soundtrack for this game was done by, forgive my pronunciation here, Masato Nakamura, who is once again a member of the band Dreams Come True, just like in the first game when they made Green Hill Zone and the music for the first game. Now, because of the success of the Sonic franchise and their involvement with it, they originally didn't ask for much to be included on things, featured on things, or for their music to be used, but considering they got so popular after their work on Sonic the Hedgehog, the price to work with them raised pretty considerably after everything. If I had to guess as to why they chose to use this Arabic music for for Oil Ocean Zone, it would be simply because oil is associated with the Middle East for a lot of people, and I guess that includes people in Japan as well. So it is what it is, I suppose. But regardless, it's an amazing track. But here we have these rising platforms, some elevators to ride, and even oil slides. All in all, it's a pretty fun level. Of course, as we continue on to Act 2, a lot of the things that we go through become more dangerous, as you will, if you will. But overall, it is quite a fun level. I would say it's definitely one of my favorites of the game, and probably one of my favorites of the early classic Sonic games in general, I would say. At the end of this zone, we have Eggman in a submarine as he submerges himself in the oil and kind of hides there while he sends out these claws for you to avoid. Once again, if you're supersonic, you can take him down, no sweat. And it's pretty easy to avoid the things that he sends out anyway, so it's not really the end of the world. But Supersonic can also stand in the oil, withstand that. You can handle the oil as well as regular Sonic. You will sink because it's this thick oil that you're sinking in. And he'll also send out this beam with a wave of fire that'll cover the platform you're on as well. So, um, of course, your best bet would be just staying supersonic, taking him down that way if you want to make it really easy. But if you want to make it more of a challenge for yourself and avoid those things, you can, of course, always do that too. And that's one of the great things about the Sonic franchise that's so enjoyable to me is there are many different ways to play and enjoy the games, and no two playthroughs have to be necessarily the same. Oil Ocean Zone, like I said, is, I would say, one of my favorite levels in the early series. Not the biggest fan of Mystic Cave. There's just kind of a lot of like stopping and waiting, and kind of it's a slower level. It's not really my favorite, but I really do like Oil Ocean Zone here. And with that, we now make it to the hardest zone in the game, which is Metropolis Zone. This zone was originally going to be called Genocide City Zone, and in all honesty, yeah, it kind of makes sense because this entire level wants to commit a genocide on you. This level wants you dead. Now, there are crushers, there are spikes, there are many different things, but the worst of it, by far, is the dickish enemy placement of things like shell crackers, which are around just about every corner. Now, a lot of people really dislike the slicers, as they're called, which are these like little praying mantis looking things that throw, well, kind of like a blade leaf at you. But to me, the shell crackers are the absolute worst. These things appear just pretty much out of nowhere. The slicers aren't good either, but the shell crackers are just absolutely insane. Good luck holding on to 50 rings and ever seeing supersonic in this level. But if you do get supersonic, it's a great way to say fuck you to the dickish enemy placement of this entire zone. And for me personally, while the crab meats and the slicers are really bad, they don't even compare to the hatred I have for, I believe they're called Staros, or maybe I'm thinking of the DC villain. These star robots that shoot out spikes. If you're not supersonic here, you're going to have a really bad time because as soon as you pass them, they will fire out these spikes in all directions. And if you get hit, your ass is going back to the bottom of the floor here below where the screw is that you're running up. So what you have to do is the classic 90s trick of just simply walk a bit off screen until it resets itself, then run up the screw thing again. I have to imagine that things like this were intentional because they didn't make the robots respawn like, say, how robots do in Mega Man games. So it's not like the designers didn't know what they were doing with this enemy placement and, a moment like that in the game. It has caused many, many, just frustrated moments for myself, and I'm sure many others like you as well. It's not great. Like I said, this entire zone wants you dead. Genocide City would have actually been really fitting, but luckily, Sonic Team realized what genocide actually meant, and we're like, okay, maybe let's not use that as the level for the zone. But yeah, it does want you dead though. For the boss of Labyrinth Zone, we have Eggman yet again, only this time he has actual eggs around him as he sends out these little duplicates of himself. The idea is you're meant to jump into them to destroy them, and these essentially act as a shield. He'll come down each time you take one of these out, and you'll be able to gain another hit on him, but basically once you destroy all of these, he'll start firing a laser and you'll be able to just jump on him like normal and take him out. Once again, obviously as supersonic, it's not really a challenge at all, but that's essentially how you're going to handle it in a regular fight, if you will. Relatively good form of a boss, I would say, and I really like the idea that they played with the pun of his name being Eggman and had him actually using eggs as a shield and, in a way, a weapon against you as well, because he sends them out to attack you as well. And with all of that, we're, of course, on to the next zone. And now we have Sky Chase Zone. Now, while Mystic Cave Zone was kind of boring and slow for my liking, and Metropolis Zone, I almost wanted to call it Genocide City, Metropolis Zone was painstakingly difficult and really just cheap with a lot of its enemy placement. None of that compares to the annoyance that I have for Sky Chase Zone. I really don't like this level. The entire level, you're on Tails' plane, taking down, well, Sonic's plane, really. Tails is just piloting it, and you're meant to take down badniks in the sky. And it's an auto scroller. For one, I don't really like auto scrolling levels in platformers in general, and for another, you can see by this image here how close Sonic is to slipping off. If you collect 50 rings and become Supersonic, which, remember, if you jump once you have 50 rings, you're automatically going to turn into Supersonic. There's no way to, there's no specific button you have to push to trigger it or anything. You jump, you're turning Supersonic. And this is a level where you're going to be jumping all the time. You turn Supersonic, you're liable to just fly off that plane. And yeah, it's just not that great of a level in my opinion. Now, I do really like the transitions of the next few levels we're about to go through here. This next level is the final full level of the game in Wing Fortress Zone, where we see Tails' plane shot down before you have to actually jump off of it, kind of like a playable cutscene, and continue on with the level. I just like that. I think it's a nice little kind of moment to it's interactive because it's still interactive as a game medium, but it's also yeah. I really like that concept, if you will. But I really do love the level itself too, and how you're jumping around on pieces of the ship in order to get through. It is a very fun level, and it's definitely a level where if you don't have Supersonic yet, you're definitely going to want Supersonic, especially when we get to the boss of this level. This level is filled with bottomless pits, which Supersonic won't protect you against, but what it will protect you against is the boss of this level. This time you're not actually fighting Eggman directly, rather he traps you in a room with these two beams closing you off, and as they close together, you have this laser just shooting down at you. And as normal Sonic, the only way to destroy it is by jumping into it by jumping on these platforms here. The problem is these platforms have these spikes at the bottom, so you're avoiding this giant laser being fired at you, being closed off by the room, and your only platforms also have a high risk of actually causing damage to you. Of course, as Supersonic, this is a piece of cake, but as regular Sonic, it's a pretty big pain. Like I said, at this point, you're definitely going to want Supersonic, either by the cheat code, as I mentioned before, or getting him legitimately through the Chaos Summon from the special stages. However you want to handle it, and if you're up for the challenge, feel free to handle it the other way, but, I highly recommend Supersonic here. Once that's all done, we're finally at Endgame, and we have yet another nice transition where Sonic goes from the outside of the ship to hopping on a rocket ship, and it actually takes him from Earth up into space, and we enter Death Egg Zone. Yes, Death Egg is a play on Death Star from Star Wars, but me being a Sonic fan, I'm so used to the concept of the Death Egg, I think of the Death Egg before I think of the Death Star. Take that as you will. Now, this level is an absolute gauntlet, as you have no rings, and you first take on Mecha Sonic. Many of you may be more familiar, of course, with Metal Sonic, which he doesn't come about until Sonic CD. Now, it is true that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Sonic CD were being developed around the same time, although, as I understand it, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 basically officially comes first in release order, and Sonic CD comes later. Mecha Sonic, though, is really just a robotic version of Sonic that is much more deadly, and he does follow a set pattern that you can easily learn and take him out, but he is a pretty daunting character. But none of that compares to the final boss, as we have Eggman in what is known by the fan base and just in general, the Death Egg robot. This robot has been known as one of the hardest bosses in not just Sonic games or the Sonic franchise or 90s games or anything, but video games in general. This boss, once again, no rings, one hit, and you're done. He has very, very, very specific and relatively small hit points where you can hit him from behind, but you risk running into his jet engines, which will kill you. You can hit him from the front. You're supposed to him kind of in the face area, but you risk running into his sharp claws, which again instantly kill you. Avoiding his actual attacks isn't really that difficult, in my opinion. He has these moments where he flies up and you have this target on you that you really just need to simply avoid before he slams down on you and attempts to attack you again. But for me, it's always been more about actually trying to hit him that causes more damage and is more dangerous than his regular attacks, if you will. But once all is said and done, you destroy the robot, you save the day, run out of the death egg basically as it's blowing up, and there are multiple endings to this game here. There is one ending in which, if you have all 7 Chaos Emeralds, again, whether you cheated to get them like I do, or you got them all legitimately, you will end with Tails flying in his plane and you flying by him side by side. Now, it is a nice little moment here as you have this nice little shot of the two flying together like this, and this is a really nice way to end this. Now, I completely understand people that prefer this ending without the Chaos Emeralds, where Tails actually saves you and you end with a nice fist bump, because you kind of see a lot more of that camaraderie of Sonic and Tails working together rather than Sonic just being like, I went super, I don't even need you, buddy, I can fly. But in any case, I do think that him being super leads better into the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 game, as we'll discuss at a later date. But with that, of course, we have the credits, and that is the end of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. A major improvement from the first game. The first game, there was nothing really inherently wrong with it, except for Labyrinth Zone, and even Marble Zone to an extent. I would say some of the negatives that existed in Sonic the Hedgehog, the first one for the Genesis, did carry on over a little bit with things like the kind of slowness and tediousness of Mystic Cave Zone, as well as some other aspects like the dickish enemy placement and kind of unfairness of Labyrinth Zone carried over a bit into, say, I keep wanting to call it Genocide City Zone, um, Metropolis Zone. And of course, I really didn't care for that one level, I can't even remember the name of it, Sky Chase Zone. But other than those things, the game overall was just really good. I do think the ending was very, kind of, very kind of cheap as well. How it's so difficult to actually get a hit on, Eggman's robot at the end there, and every time you try to hit him, you run the risk of dying. And of course, this was when this was released in '92. You died enough times, you got a game over. You were going back to not Green Hill Zone. You were going back to Emerald Hill Zone. But overall, though, just an incredibly good game. There's a lot of debate within the franchise, or excuse me, within the fan base, as to whether Sonic the Hedgehog 2 or Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles are a better game overall. I'm not exactly sure where. I think I lean more towards Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but we'll discuss that more when we look at that one later in the future. But there was an 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 as well. But in my honest opinion, the only thing that was really notable about this one was that if you don't get all the emeralds in the Game Gear version or the Master System version of Sonic 2, it's heavily implied that Tails dies. So, I mean, hey, the ending of Sonic, the original Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, or sorry, excuse me, the bad ending of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, where he doesn't turn super, is a hell of a lot better than the bad ending of the Game Gear version. So, geez. But in any case, this game, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Genesis, was the one that really put Sonic on the map. From here, we started seeing TV shows, comic books, and many other, just the franchise really exploding into popularity from 92 and on throughout much of the 90s. The next time we talk about this franchise, we are going to start looking at a lot of the early Archie comics and maybe some of the Fleetway comics as well. But until then, those will be discussed for another day. Those are separate videos. But until then, and as always, these are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Follow me on social media for more. Subscribe, ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like. And if not, I hope you find something to do like. Later, guys. Peace and love.